Good morning. Yeah, I'm in a little bit of a different spot on our back 40, as I call it, this morning. But don't be fooled when you hear the chickens crowing, because I'm not all that far from the hen house, and I'm not all that far from chickens either, because they come all the way back to the back end of our property to wine and dine themselves. They even go back into the neighbor's cow pasture and there find some treats, some goodies to eat, because there's lots of bugs and stuff like that back there. But I'm here because it's nice and quiet, and it's a good place to talk about a subject area that we sometimes get a bit confused about, and that is the letters of Paul. Now, what do I mean by we get confused by the letters of Paul? Well, when you pick up your Bibles, you're going to see in the Newer Testament a lot of the epistles, the letters that come after the Gospels have a title, the letter of Paul to this church, the letter of Paul to this church. And what has always been a real difficult thing for scholars to agree on is, this is really a letter from Paul, or isn't it? Is this part of this letter from Paul, or did somebody add it in later? You see, because that sort of stuff happened all the time in antiquity. All the time people were borrowing someone else's name in order to get something published. All the time they were inserting into it some of their own thoughts, some other things that maybe Paul wrote that they figured, well, that fits in here, let's just stick it here because we don't want to lose it. Because remember, a lot of these things were being passed around word of mouth. We don't have complete letters from Paul himself. We have bits and pieces, and everything's been kind of scrambled and put together over time, and it's not always an easy task to do. Well, I say that only because we have that going on last week and this week and even in the next week with the Paul's letter to the Romans, where we're in a chunk, a section. We're in 3 chapters where we're not exactly sure if they fit with the rest of the book of Romans. We're pretty sure it was Paul that wrote it. I mean, it's in his style, the kind of language he uses. But whether it was another letter, whether it was written for another group of people, perhaps in the Roman Empire, we don't know. But it fits beautifully right to where it's found now, chapters 9 through 11. And what's really important to realize is, I think this is one of the most critical parts of Paul's thoughts, Pauline theology, if you want to call it that, because that's what it is, for us to understand today. Because I think so many Christians just get it wrong. Not so much what Paul had to say, but the whole concept of where do the Jewish people fit into the grand scheme of God right now. Oh, you know what? There's lots of people that have no problems with saying, yep, the Jews, they were God's chosen people. He brought them out of Egypt. He had given the promise to Abraham, all that kind of stuff that's all over the Old Testament. But when it comes to now, after Jesus has been here with us and ascended into heaven, a lot of Christians write off the Jewish people. They say, well, they rejected Jesus. They didn't like his message. They even go as far as to say that the Jews killed Jesus. And so you have a lot of anti-Semitism that's prevalent in this world. And a lot of that is because of we Christians through the ages basically saying God has given up on them. Any Christian, and this is my personal viewpoint, but not mine alone. Any Christian who says that needs to go back and read chapters 9 through 11 of the book of Romans. Paul can't be any clearer in saying this. I hurt. This is the Apostle Paul now. I hurt and I grieve deep within my heart for my people, my kinfolk. but they are still God's chosen people. God has not given up on them. God does not go back on his promises. They are the people of God. Paul didn't have a struggle with accepting the Jews into the fold of Christendom because there was no such thing as Christendom at that point in his life. He's writing in the 60s AD, all right? Got that? That's just not too long after Jesus ascended into heaven. He's writing his letters, and it's either Jew or Gentile. It's either the Jewish people or non-Jewish people. There's no Christians. There are simply Jewish people who believe that Jesus is Messiah, and the Jews who just can't quite accept that into their faith. But Paul always remained a Jew throughout his life. As he's writing his letters, he's writing them as a Jew. Paul's struggle is convincing other Jews who had accepted Jesus as Messiah to accept these people who were never Jews in their life, the Gentiles, the pagan people, so to speak, trying to get his fellow Jews who believe in Jesus to accept them into this fold. Because there were so many Jews who still felt that regardless whether you believed in Jesus or not, you had to be circumcised if you were a male, and you still had to follow the Torah, the law, or else nothing else matters. Paul is saying Jesus has done a whole new thing for us. He has freed us not from following the law, he has freed us to fully live out the law. And he has also done what we find in our gospel lesson for this coming up Sunday when Jesus heals the daughter of a Canaanite woman who is non-Jewish. We also find it in our Old Testament lesson from Isaiah, where Isaiah says, hey, they're coming in. Also in our Psalm, all of that talk about all the nations. That's all foreigners, all non-Jewish countries are going to be flocking to you, flocking and calling Yahweh their God. All right? That's all over the place. Paul is telling the people in our lesson for this Sunday, and I'm not going to read it because it's kind of choppy. They leave out some verses, but you really need to read the entire 9 through 11, those chapters, but especially read all the ones that are left out in today's lesson. And in fact, if you follow us on Facebook and you're watching our service live this Sunday, you're going to see we're reading all the stuff that's left out too. You have to understand Paul's message. God hasn't given up on his people, never has, never will. They are still the people of God. You and I, like right now, you and me, we're not the people of God that we're called to be a light to the world. Not if you go strictly by the Hebrew Scriptures. But as Paul says, and as we find out throughout the New Testament, we have been invited in. We have been grafted in. And unless you have Jewish heritage, that's just the way it is. And it's grand. And it's glorious. And it's the way it should be. So we, as people of God who are Gentiles, who are non-Jewish, should never, ever say that God has forsaken the Jewish people. In fact, you should be calling them brothers and sisters because they are brothers and sisters of our faith. And I'll take it even one step further, and a lot of people are going to look at me, shake their heads, and say, you are nuts. I'm never going to listen to another thing you have to say. You better say the same thing about your Islamic brothers and sisters as well. They are part of the faith of Abraham. Abraham is their father too. They are part of this. And just because we've diverged along the way, it doesn't mean we don't care for one another. It doesn't mean we don't care for everyone, because we do. We do. We have the light of Christ in our lives. We have experienced His love, His grace, His forgiveness, His power of reconciliation. And that's what we need to be about, especially in this world, especially in this country that is so divided along racial lines, along religious lines. I mean, think about it. As Christians, we don't even get along with each other, and we fight, and we have our differences, and we have some pretty awful things that we sometimes sling at each other. All of that should be going out the window right now as we realize this whole thing called love, grace, forgiveness, the things that I harp on all the time because the scriptures harp on them all the time, it literally floods the readings that we have. It floods this world constantly because God does that through you and through me. We need to be all about love and reconciliation, not judgment, not condemnation, not hatred, not prejudice. No, we need to be the ones who are the vehicles of God's grace in this world. That's what the Apostle Paul gets at in these chapters 9 through 11. Whether they belong in the book of Romans originally or not, they fit in beautifully with his message from start to finish. So if they got edited in, good job, editor, whatever monk or whoever did that, because they saved for us a vital piece of theology, of God talk that you and I need to share in this world today. Well, again, it's a wonderful day outside, and I told you that everybody follows me back here. Berta is one of them. The chickens are others. There's no place to escape these animals on this ranch. But it's awesome, and I love it. Go out there, have a wonderful day, and remember, God's love shines through you and me, and it's meant for a hurting world that we live in today. Blessings be with you.